If you're searching for a home in Burlingame or Hillsborough and you feel like you're constantly losing out, you're not imagining it. There's actually a massive gap between what buyers want and what's actually available. I'm gonna help you understand the realities of the market and help you adjust your expectations so you can still find your dream home. I'm Raziel, and I've helped hundreds of nice people like you buy and sell homes throughout San Mateo County. And to see more of what it's like living in San Mateo County, join me every Monday at 5 p.m. for my latest videos with a ton of insights on what's happening here. So let's dive in. All right, so let's talk about the supply issue that we have here. So in Burlingame, last year, we had 170 sales out of 6,200 houses. That is the second fewest number of sales we've had in any year in the last 25 years. In fact, 2023 was the fewest number, and then last year was the second lowest. And I think this year, unfortunately for buyers, is we're gonna see similar numbers again. We're about 135 sales year to date, and we're recording this at the end of October. And then last year in Hillsborough, there were just 102 sales out of 3,800 homes, and also very similar supply issues as Burlingame. So if you're a buyer, my goal today is to be super real with you about what it's gonna take to buy in these markets. So I'm gonna share with you my opinion on the 10 biggest issues that I see right now between what buyers want and what's actually available from a listing perspective, okay? And so stick with me on this. The first thing has to do with floor plans. Now, floor plans, you've probably seen if you've already been poking around quite a bit, is there's a huge variety of floor plans, but what most buyers want today is an open concept floor plan. This just means that when you walk into the living room, the dining room, there's like not necessarily formal rooms there. And this is regardless of price. So most buyers, and by say open, I don't just mean like one room is the whole main level, okay? I'm talking about like a kitchen and a dining room or family room that are kind of open, more like a great room feel. And then huge bonus points if that can open up to the backyard. Very unusual that I'll have buyers say, I really want to have formal rooms everywhere. Most people like kind of this open concept of living. And so it's hard to get that at all price points. And so a very good floor plan can affect price by even $1 million or more, depending on where the location is and what the condition is. The second point, 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes in Burlingame. This year so far, we've only had 1/3 of all the sales have been 3-2s. That's it, or just 3-bedroom homes. That's crazy. There's only been 45 sales year to date. We'll end up with 50 or 55 throughout the year. But if you're looking for a 3-bedroom home in Burlingame, and your budget is 2.5 to 3 or 3.5 million, like you're just not gonna have a lot of options. When you kind of do the math there and you start to think about it, you're looking at about 1 home per week coming on the market in Burlingame. That's a 3-bedroom. And then you say within those 3 bedrooms, how many of those are in a location that I like? Now all of Burlingame's fantastic, but there's certain streets and locations that I'm less of a fan of personally. And I'd much rather see someone spend 5 or 10 or 15% more to maybe get a location with a little bit less noise, a little bit less traffic nearby, maybe a few less utility poles visible on the street. I mean, there's a lot of nuance that goes into this and that all affects value. But generally, if you spend a little bit more, you're gonna get a little bit more on the back end from that perspective. If you say of those 45 homes, how many are in a location that you like? How many of them are with a floor plan you like or an open floor plan? I'd say less than half of those. How many of those are remodeled? Well, usually the good floor plans, the remodeled ones, those kind of go hand in hand. So you can kind of think about there's maybe 10 to 25 or 30 3-bedroom homes that sell in a year that I would say are actually really good value. Floor plans that are less sought after. I remember in my real estate classes that I took at College of San Mateo 20 years ago when I was getting my real estate license, they would call those floor plans functionally obsolete. I think that's a little direct and it's a little blunt, but floor plans that are functionally obsolete, very few people want, and then you get a huge discount for that. A few years ago, I represented a buyer on a home in the Burlingame Gables neighborhood, and this was the most expensive 3-bedroom home that I'm aware of that sold. This was about 1,500 square feet, had been remodeled about 6 years before. It was a super open floor plan, high ceilings, open the backyard, and actually the cool thing on these 1-level homes, you get much higher ceilings than homes with 2 stories. Now, if you need a 2-story home, okay, like that just is what it is. But on the 1-level homes, you can sometimes get like a 14-foot ceiling, which I am personally a huge fan of. And so that home ended up selling at the time for around 3.3 million, which is, again, kind of a high bar. The reason why we don't see so many and why it's so frustrating for buyers, I know many buyers who would say, hey, we'd pay 3 million plus or minus in Burlingame for a really good floor plan. It's because most people who are investing the big dollars into these homes to get the really good floor plans, they're adding on a second story because the economies of scale, when you add more square footage, your price per square foot drops. And so that's not what everyone does, but that is probably what 90% of buyers do. Like my wife and I are the exception. We have a one-level home that's 3 bedrooms, about 1,800 square feet, and we have very high ceilings, and we love it, an open floor plan. But I can appreciate that's, most people are looking for a little bit more than that once they start spending those high dollars on a remodel. The third thing that I see huge demand for, but that we just don't see a lot of supply, are one-level homes in Hillsborough. There's huge demand for these because a lot of people are downsizing, or because the lot size is so large. In Hillsborough, the average lot size, or I shouldn't say average, but the minimum lot size is pretty much gonna be half an acre or more, which I don't remember everything, but I do remember that from real estate school. Okay, so in Hillsborough, you have many people with very healthy budgets who are looking $5, $6, $7, $8 million. And they might say, look, if I have a home on that size lot, I'd rather it just be one level. And so where can you get a one level home in Hillsborough? You can get one up in the Carolines neighborhood, some in the Lakeview neighborhood. This is kind of more west, closer to 280. And that's where you're gonna kind of get the best value. And you could be halfway up the hill. You're still gonna be close to downtown Burlingame or downtown San Mateo, which I think is acceptable for many people who wanna be kind of closer to a downtown. And then if you kind of wanna be really flat in Hillsborough, like in the Country Club neighborhood, for example, where you can only get a one level home, ranch style, that's gonna be big bucks. So you're gonna be looking at around $5 million just for a lot value there. There's a couple homes that sold recently on Rockridge and Reddington in Hillsborough. Those sold in the low fives and high fives, and these are one level homes in very good locations with a flat yard, or mostly flat yard, but I'd say these were pretty flat. But those homes definitely could benefit from some significant investment. So people just bought like a lot value plus a really nice house, but these homes probably needed a couple $1 million in renovations to kind of bring them up to where a modern buyer would expect and want. Is that a huge gap? It is, especially if you're okay being up at the top of the hill and you value being close to 280, then you're gonna be able to have a little bit easier time. But then my view is, okay, if you're really close to 280, you don't wanna be too close where you're hearing in your backyard to like a shh type of sound, right? That's not that ideal, at least from my perspective when you're spending that kind of money. Number 4, 2-bedroom homes. Okay, so there's massive demand for 2-bedroom homes. Now, sure, most people who are buying a 2-bedroom home, would they prefer a 3-bedroom home? Yes. Now, in 2-bedroom homes, there's none of those in Hillsborough for obvious reasons, but in Burlingame, we actually have a higher percentage. I haven't looked at the exact numbers, but I probably could pull some information from the title company. A lot fewer 2-bedroom homes in San Mateo, San Carlos, Belmont, Redwood City. Then you'll see like Burlingame does have a meaningful supply of 2-bedroom homes. However, and the reason why these are so sought after by buyers is the Burlingame buyer can afford to buy for a 2-bedroom in Burlingame, a 3-bedroom in San Mateo or Millbrae or most other towns in the peninsula. But someone who chooses to be in Burlingame for a 2-bedroom home is like, I really value Burlingame. I like the walkability. I like the community feel. I like Broadway, Burlingame Ave, Caltrain, just the whole package here, Bay Trail. I could go on and on. You can watch a few other of my YouTube videos on why I love Burlingame so much. And I did grow up here. But I think that the Burlingame buyer who wants that 2-bedroom, they just want to get their foot in the door. Typically that buyer might be a little bit younger, or it could be someone who's downsizing and just wants to be flat and walkable in a small, cute house to Burlingame Ave or Broadway. And so there's only a few neighborhoods where you can get a 2-bedroom home. That's going to be Burlingame Gables, Lion Hogue, Burlingame Terrace, Burlingame Village, Burlingame Gardens, Burlingame Grove. In west of El Camino in Burlingame, you see very, very few 2-bedroom homes. There was one that sold, I think on Vancouver, across from Roosevelt Elementary School a few months ago for $2.5 million. But that was an aberration. Most 2-bedroom homes that pop up for sale in East Addition end up getting torn down and built up as new construction. In the rest of Burlingame, east of El Camino, in these incredible flat neighborhoods, and by the way, being east of El Camino in Burlingame is just as valuable as being west of El Camino. It's just the homes west of El Camino in Burlingame are larger, so therefore they sell for more money. But when you look at price per square foot throughout Burlingame, it's pretty fluid throughout. And of course, there's some exceptions here and there, but overall, it's very desirable from wherever you are. People love the 2-bedroom homes if they have attached garages, which many of them do. I'm a massive fan of those, because then if you want to put an ADU, which we'll talk more about in a sec, if you want to put an ADU in your backyard, you don't have a more traditional project. You could spend $5 million on a new construction home in East Addition of Burlingame, And that home is gonna have usually a detached garage on the back left or back right side with a driveway going down the length of one of the sides of the property. But if you can buy a home with an attached garage and a higher percentage of 2 bedrooms have those, like my wife and I have bought a couple homes like that in Burlingame that we own, started out as 2 bedrooms and then expanded on one of them. Having an attached garage, in my view, is a winning strategy. There's just so few of those. If you think about how many 2 bedrooms are selling in Burlingame per year, it's only a few dozen at the most, but usually it's like less than 20. You'd really want to be patient, and I think it's a big source of frustration for many buyers who want a 2-bedroom and don't want something that's a tear down, something that's more move-inable. It doesn't have to be all tricked out. You're gonna have to be patient. All right, number 5, homes with ADUs. So an ADU is an accessory dwelling unit. It's basically like a guest cottage in your backyard. This became allowed in California in January 2020 in response to the state housing crisis to create more housing. However, if you do put an ADU in your backyard, there's no requirement that it needs to be rented out. Obviously, if you do, that's helping everyone out, but many people who are spending a few $100,000 to put them in are using them more for personal space. However, there's a ton of value in this. You can use it for work from home. You can use it for your in-laws or parents who are coming to live with you or stay with you for a few weeks at a time if they're visiting from another country or other part of the United States. So ADUs are very popular. I haven't had anyone who said, oh geez, I wouldn't want that. So almost everyone wants an ADU. But because this is such a new thing, there's very few homes that we're seeing come on the market that actually have them. It's one of the biggest, I don't say frustrations, but it's one of the biggest things that people tell me that they want. But the good news is, if you buy a home with an attached garage, what we were talking about a second ago, then you'll easily be able to put one into your backyard, right? Because you just pop it into the back left or right corner. And usually in Burlingame, you're gonna have a 4-foot setback, and in Hillsborough, the setback, I believe, is a little bit larger than that due to the lot size. But you're gonna be able to put it very close to the lot line, which is nice. Cost-wise on an ADU, depends on the size. You know, if you're doing one in Burlingame, you could be looking at anywhere from $200,000, $300,000, $400,000. If you're looking in Hillsborough, if you're gonna be doing a bigger one, you can get up to 1,000 or 1,100, 1,200 square feet. You could be spending 1,000 a foot. So could you spend $1 million on an ADU? Yes, you can. But the good news is, if let's say you spent at the higher end, like $1,000 a square foot to put one in, which would be very, very nice quality. On the back end, if you were to sell the property, that could be worth anywhere from $1,300 to $1,700 or $1,800 a square foot. So the math does make sense on these. I guess my takeaway for you would be, as you're kind of thinking about it, no one needs an ADU, but I think they're the top of a lot of people's lists. So even though there's very few homes that come on the market that have them, if you want to put one in, there's a good chance you're going to be able to do so. Now, you could always convert a garage that's there into living space. You would need to have plumbing and all that for it to be considered a legal ADU, but you couldn't do that in Burlingame before 2020. Hillsborough, you've been able to with the lot size for a while, but they're really encouraging all of this density because of the state housing mandate. So, you know, they're not that difficult to put in. Number 6, larger lots in flat neighborhoods in Burlingame. Oh my gosh, everyone would like a larger lot. Now you can take a look, I'll put it in the description below. I have a Google map where we've taken every single home in Burlingame and plotted the lot size and color coded. So we did nerd out on that, but I'm very proud of it, and you might find that interesting. But you'll see that most lots in Burlingame are 5,000 to 6,000 square feet, but many people would prefer to get a lot size of 7,500, 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 square feet. And it is not impossible, but there's just so few of them in the flat neighborhoods. Where you can get them more easily is up in the hills. So Mills Estates and the Burlingame Hills neighborhood, most lots there are just larger and give you a lot more space and privacy and all that. But if you want to be in Burlingame and you want to be in a flat neighborhood, you're going to find the most oversized lots are going to be in the Burlingame Park neighborhood. Burlingame Park is the most expensive neighborhood in Burlingame. It's just west of El Camino, walking distance to downtown Burlingame. It's fantastic. It's the top of almost everyone's list for a good reason. Very high tree density. You have Pershing Park right there. A lot of older, beautiful homes, a lot of new construction homes in there. Price range in Burlingame Park is gonna be anywhere from about $3.5 million up to $8 million, generally speaking. But we even had a sale recently for $17 million on Pepper. So it's all possible. But what's also interesting, and when you kind of think about Burlingame and Hillsborough, price per square foot in Hillsborough has always been higher than Burlingame, but that inverted in 2018. So now it is more expensive per square foot to buy a home in Burlingame. Why is that? I think there's a few theories, and I won't go deep into that now. We'll catch that on a future video. But I think it is worth noting that you'll see many buyers who can afford to buy in Hillsborough at Hillsborough prices would prefer to buy in Burlingame because they want to be a little bit closer to downtown Burlingame. And so that's why you'll see in Burlingame Park where you have these larger homes, like that one on Pepper that sold for 17 million, that's a ridiculous number. To be fair, it was a 7,000 square foot home, basically new construction on more than a half-acre lot. And so, of course, that's very valuable real estate. But we've seen a few other big sales in there. I sold something last year off market in Burlingame Park, in the $7-8 million range. There's a home on Elm that just closed for $9 million. I think the demand has shown us that people are willing to pay big bucks to live in Burlingame Park, but just the supply is totally not there. And I don't see any of that changing because Burlingame, Hillsborough are end destinations for so many people. It's rare that I'll have someone say, Raziel, you know what? I lived in Burlingame, Hillsborough for a while and I want to move to San Mateo or San Carlos. Or, I do have some people like empty nesters who moved back to San Francisco, Pied à Terre, kids are all grown up, that happens. But these are end destinations. So people who can afford to buy homes in the best locations and the best streets with the best floor plans, those are just rarely coming up for sale. Christine, I don't know what she's up to.
I guess you guys are doing conferences today.
Yeah, at one.
And you're videoing yourself.
Yeah, so we're doing a video today on the 10 biggest supply gaps for what buyers want. So 2-bedroom homes in Burlingame, people would like that, or all that.
People want a 2-bedroom home?
There's huge demand for that. Well,
Why?
they want to just get into Burlingame.
Oh, like a
starter home. Yes,
together.
yeah.
What was the food planner? So Wes is like, I think we need to do a dry run.
I'll be there. See ya. If you hadn't noticed already, you see a little bit of a theme here. So we've been walking this morning all throughout downtown Burlingame and Washington Park in front of Burlingame High School. It's just so much fun to see so many people out and about. Okay, number 7, new construction homes in general in Burlingame and Hillsborough, but particularly in Burlingame, there's very robust demand at all price points for this. Now, would people be willing to buy a 2-bedroom home that was new construction? For sure. Or a 3-bedroom, yes. But the economies of scale are such that homeowners aren't building that typically, and builders are not building that. And by builders, I mean people who do this on spec, so speculation, meaning there could be a home builder in Burlingame who does 1 or 2 homes a year, and then they build it, they buy it, they build it, they get it all approved and finalized, and then they sell that new construction home. And so most new construction homes we're seeing are gonna be anywhere from $4.5 to $6 million is kind of the typical range. It's a very robust buyer pool. And there's plenty of buyers who can afford that price, but the reason why these are in such huge demand, of course, not just because they're new and big and beautiful, but it's also because the floor plans on these homes are stellar. And most people who want to have that open concept, great room feel where the kitchen spills out into the backyard, and if you have a family, you can see your kids playing around in the backyard. But anyways, these are very sought after floor plans, and you typically only see those on homes built in the last 0 to 20 years. Now, we see very little brand new construction that pops up. I'd say 5, 6 a year, maybe 10 at the most. But you could buy a home that's between 5 and 20 years old that's gonna totally check the box on floor plan. Maybe the finishes are a little bit more dated. I've done a few of those off market in the last year representing buyers in Burlingame in particular. They're a little bit older, but still way newer than everything else in Burlingame. And all of those there's 3 that I have in mind now. And all 3 of those were in the mid $4 million range. And one client ended up putting over $1 million into that project. Another client moved right in. They had black cabinets in the kitchen, which was a little funky. That's what the seller had there before. But anyways, these are minor things if you get the right floor plan. If I had to speculate what the demand was, I bet it's at least 3 to 4x what the supply is in Burlingame. So that's why when we see them pop up, and especially for these newer builds, just because it's newer doesn't mean the quality is there. It means the floor plan is usually there, but the quality isn't always there. It's not like just because of that, I'd go ahead and buy it. I'd really want to make sure it feels like they didn't cut any corners. I saw a home recently that was for sale in Burlingame. It was a new construction home, and I went to see it, and I was like, why is this floor plan? I gave the floor plan basically like a B- or C+. So I was like, you could have gone through all this thought. It wouldn't have been that much more expensive to have a good architect build out that house. But anyways, it is what it is. Number 8, properties with views and a flat lot. That is not common. So obviously we're talking about hillier neighborhoods. So that's gonna be Mills Estates, Burlingame Hills, Carolines, Lakeview, and a couple others. So if you want a really good view, and what is a really good view? I mean, a neighborhood view is one thing, but if you want to, most people when they talk about views, they're talking about a view of the bay. And it's really, really hard to get a good view. I had a listing a few months ago on Adeline, the Burlingame Hills neighborhood, which was one of the best views that I've ever seen. Totally panoramic. It was a flat pad, but it was a steep driveway to kind of get down there. And then when you kind of came out of the house, if you made a left or right on Adeline, you could kind of go for a walk there, but it was pretty steep. There's a little bit of a trade-off. If you want the view, there's gonna be the lot itself. It's not gonna necessarily be like in a flat, walkable neighborhood. There's many people who would love the view and would love the flat neighborhood, but those two things just don't go hand in hand much in Burlingame or Hillsborough. Now there's many homes with the views and there's many homes with flat lots, but there's very few of those where they go hand in hand. And that demand is actually surprisingly high. And for the last biggest thing, this is number 9. I know I said there was gonna be 10, but I ended up combining 2 of them on floor plan because I had 2 bullet points on them. It's gonna be larger square footage homes in Burlingame that are gonna be under $4 million with an open floor plan. If you're looking to buy a really awesome floor plan in Burlingame and you wanna have at least 2,500 square feet or more, it's gonna be really hard to get that under $4 million. And it's really heartbreaking when you think about it. You have worked so hard to be able to spend $4 million, but you really wanna have that open floor plan. Could you buy a home for $3 million and then go put $1 million into it to get that better floor plan? The answer is yes. But I'd say a vast majority of buyers who could buy a home for, and I should actually reframe that. It's not really 3, put $1 million, you get to 4, and now it's open. You really have to spend 3 and maybe put $1.5 million into it. Or you could spend like mid 3s and then maybe still put another $1 million into it. So it's really hard, I guess is my point, to get all that square footage and the condition and the floor plan and be under $4 million. The budget really needs to be more like $4.5 or $5 million. And it's really challenging, especially in Burlingame, if you want to be in a flatter neighborhood to get all of that. There's a ton of buyers out there who can afford $3 to $4 million in Burlingame. And by a ton, I realize, we're just talking about a very specific subset of a market, which is Burlingame in particular, because other markets, you would never see someone spend $4 million. In Belmont, I've done a couple transactions over $4 million and those are really special homes, but there's not a lot of homes at that price point, okay? Whereas in Burlingame, you have tons of homes that are valued much higher than the average, which is around 3 to 3.1, 3.2, depending on how we're slicing the data. Now, here's something that many buyers in Burlingame or Hillsborough are not aware of, and that there's a lot of homes that sell off market. Now, there's a bigger off market culture, I'd say, in San Francisco, in the Palo Alto, Menlo Park markets, but there are many homes here that do sell off market. So the important thing is to make sure you're working with a real estate professional who knows these areas extremely well. I see all the time agents are coming in to the Burlingame Hillsborough market from Fremont, from the East Bay, from San Francisco. Obviously, you can certainly do that, and with the real estate license, I can do real estate anywhere too. But I just choose to focus on a really, really small area. So if you can, work with someone who really knows the area that you're looking at, because they're gonna know all the other top agents and they're gonna be a little bit more tapped into what is coming on the market, which will add some value for you in your process. I often hear about properties well before they come in the market, so if you're interested in learning a little bit more about that, all my contact information is in the description below. So now that you've heard me talk about my top 9 things that most people want but are really hard to get, let me just add a little bit of a positive spin here, and that almost all of my clients get what they want. But in order to get what you want, it's really important to be realistic and work with a real estate professional who's giving you good advice and guiding you and setting your expectations. A more common approach for many buyers is they'll go out to open house, give feedback to their agent that way. And sure, that can work, but in my view, that's a ton of energy to be spending every weekend going to see houses. And I think a more thoughtful approach is to take a look in advance with a data-driven approach and understand, okay, what's all the data out there? If you're looking for a 2-bedroom home in Burlingame, I personally, if I was the buyer, I'd be curious, okay, well, how many 2-bedroom homes sold in Burlingame in the last 12 months? Or how many 1-level homes sold in the Carolines neighborhood in the last 12 months that were totally remodeled, if I'm thinking about downsizing? Or how many homes sold in the Easton Addition neighborhood in the last 12 months that had an age of less than 20 years? These are things that I would want to know if I was a buyer, because then I wouldn't be frustrated if I'm like, okay, after you do this exercise, figure out how many homes are popping up on a regular basis based on history over the last year or two that could match what I'm looking for. And I think that's really a good way to set your expectations and go about the process. So I would try to stack rank your most important factors, like 0 through 10, stack rank on the compromises that you're willing to make. Usually there's kind of the triangle around condition, location, and floor plan. And then the higher price you go, the more of those three parts of the triangle you can get. And you know, everyone's priorities are different. I do offer complimentary consultations with all of my prospective clients before making a decision if we're a good fit to work together. So if that's something that you're open to, all my contact info is below, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you about whether what you can get is realistic. But most important, I think it's just good to be thoughtful about what is the data out there. That way you can make a smart decision and not spin your wheels, because many buyers get really frustrated. They're like, look, I can afford $3, $4, $5 million. And I really want to be in Burlingame or Hillsborough, or my budgets. I've had clients whose budget's up to $10 million. I had one client I represent recently in the $5 million range, and I worked with them for almost a decade. Now that was a very unusual situation for what they were looking for, and there was absolutely no rush, and that's atypical. But you know, there's just not a lot out there, and I feel like be able to get good advice and understand what you can get and what you can't get, that's an important thing. That's a disservice if you're not getting that good information and doing that research before getting into your search. So to compare and contrast a little bit more between Burlingame and Hillsborough in particular, check out this video. And don't forget to grab those free neighborhood guides from my website. You can sign up for my newsletter to get really insightful market data tailored to these markets. And I'll look forward to seeing you on the next video.